Welcome back to mckilliplife. My name is Amber and today we're in the kitchen. It's cool and snowy and I thought it'd be fun to try a new baking recipe. This one is English Crumpets. The original recipe is, but the creator demonstrates it on YouTube and everything, but I'm going to try to do it with freshly milled whole grain flour and see how it comes out. So come along for the ride. So the recipe calls for all-purpose flour, and according to the research I've done, very limited research, it said that I can substitute a hard wheat 1-for-1 for all-purpose flour. So today I'm going to use red hard wheat, and it calls for 6.3 ounces, but luckily this recipe does come in grams as well. So I'm going to just weigh out the berries by grams, and then if I grind it, it should be very close to that. We're going for 180 grams. So this recipe says it makes, I want to say it was 4 to 6 crumpets, depending on the mold you're using. And I've never actually eaten crumpets, but my understanding is it's similar in texture to an English muffin. So we'll see how it turns out. I'm gonna go ahead and grind this up. So there's my flour. The first step of the recipe actually says to bloom your yeast. So we're doing 4 grams of yeast, which is supposed to be 1 teaspoon. So we'll see if it turns out right. 6 grams of sugar. And then 235 grams of 104 Fahrenheit water. So this is my kettle, and it's boiled recently, so I think we're gonna be close. We're a little bit cool at 95, so I'm gonna try warming it up a little bit. So we're at 104. I've always been told that the perfect temperature for yeast to bloom is 110. So I'm not worried about it too much. So this is 235 grams. So pouring slowly because you can't take back water. Maybe 6. So it says set aside for 10 minutes. So there's a 10-minute timer. And it's saying put the yeast in and then put the flour and salt. But I'm just going to use this bowl, so I'll just go ahead and add the salt and baking powder to this. 4 grams of salt. But it also wants me to sift it, so I'm going to try setting this in here, sharing it, and adding the 4 grams. Woo. I'm glad I put it in the sieve. That's 4 grams. I don't usually have lumps in my baking powder. It's more like baking soda that has lumps in it. So, to wait for the yeast to bloom, and then we'll be back. Okay, 10 minutes have passed and we're back with our bloomed yeast, and it says mix together, whisk for a minute, scrape down and whisk again. So I'm going to change my timer to a countdown to keep track of the time for me. So this is a hard wheat, so it should have a higher gluten content than like a soft wheat. So whisking is going to develop some gluten, and even just resting it will also develop gluten. Because there's overnight dough you can do that you basically do no kneading, and it has a lot of gluten structure just by sitting. But I will link this recipe below, and also his own video too. Okay, so that's 1 minute. And so 2:15 I'll be done. I don't actually have crumpet rings, but we'll see what I can come up with. Almost done. Okay. So it says cover and put in a warm area for 45 minutes. So I'm going to cover this and put it in my oven with the light on. That's the best way to have consistent warmth in my house. I like using these light cloths. I don't even know. It might be diapers, I'm not sure. I do like this timer. It has the stopwatch or the timer function. I think you can even set time on it, but I might be wrong. But this was an Amazon find. I can link it below too. Okay, so 45 minutes. So the crumpet recipe says when it's getting near to the end of the rise time for the dough, to get a pan heating up to 375 degrees. I don't have a way to measure that except by using my husband's temperature gun. So currently we're climbing through the 230s. And I did look to see if I had any rings that would work, and I didn't. So I just ran to the store, and surprisingly, egg rings or even metal cookie cutters are not easy to find. They'll ship them to you in 2 days, but I don't want to wait 2 days. So I did find these. They're silicone rings made to go on a black stone, which is a cast iron big grilling surface. You know, you can do a large amount of food. So if this is going to handle being on a cast iron grill outside, they can handle being in my little pot. So let's see where we are. Mm, 340, 350. I just don't know how I'm going to hold it steady. So that's actually oil. The pan itself is higher now. So let's try turning it down to medium. Because they said if you get it too hot, then the bottom's going to burn before the middle is cooked. And these are going to be weird shaped crumpets with this big clasp in the way. I don't know if I can do this higher and still be effective. We'll see. It's an experiment, however we do it. So my dough is about ready to come out. So this has been in the oven for 45 minutes. Nice and bubbly, definitely risen. So it says to fill it about halfway. The mold's about halfway up. And then they'll cook for about 5 minutes. And then we'll flip them. It's kind of like pancakes. You're looking for the edges to be bubbly and kind of dried out looking. So it's still too hot, so I'm going to turn it down. This is my hottest burner, so I'm going to just have to keep it, I guess, pretty low. I've never actually tried to take a temperature on the stove like this before. Well, I think I did one time when I tried to fry something and basically came to the conclusion it's really hard to have a consistent temperature on a stove. And if I ever wanted to go and try to fry anything again, I need to do, what do you call it? Invest in a deep fryer. So. So let's try flipping these. At least they're holding the shape. That's very brown. I don't think they're burnt, but it's definitely very brown. I think that's decent. So it says let cool in a drying rack. So I'm going to pause and eat lunch and come back to this. So before I try cooking these again, I want to check and see if these are cooked in the middle. What do you think, honey? Seem kind of dense.
Might be just a tad more cooking. What do you think?
I think I'm gonna do them thinner and see if the middle turns out differently.
Cool.
I guess it could also make them bigger, like wider around.
Yeah. How big are they supposed to be?
According to the stuff I looked up, it said crumpets are typically 3.5 inches in diameter. So this is going to be larger than the typical. So I've had the pan on the lowest setting on it. You can go a little bit lower. And we're at 396, so let's turn it up just a tad. See if we can get up to the...
So what you're saying is it stay consistent.
Yeah, it's been sitting here while we've been eating. And so the low setting on our stove is 296. Like where the dot is. A wide temperature difference between the different parts of the pan, but over here it's all in the 370s, 380s. I'm going to try again. I'm going to do it much thinner and much wider than before and see if we can get a better texture in the middle. Batter does not want to pour. I think mine is a lot more springy batter than his was, because I seem to remember his pouring. Whereas mine is acting like bread batter. So I'll do this. And I don't think it's going to take the 5 minutes since it's thinner and wider. So I'll just stand here and look. Same thing I do with pancakes. Just looking for the edges to dry out and bubbles to come to the surface. Really don't know if we even need these things because I think it's already set. This won't be the pretty shape that you often see in the pictures. But if they taste good, then that's all that matters. It's almost like a cross between a pancake and a English muffin. But you definitely cook these at a lower heat. Whoa, plenty toasty. Just makes me wonder what would happen if I put some of this in the oven and baked it. I think they're supposed to have a fried quality, so it probably won't taste and have the texture exactly when you have it in the oven, but we'll see. I'll put this in the oven and continue cooking this one here. We'll see what happens. I have my oven set to convection because it tends to heat up faster when I do that. So for the oven, I think I'm going to use this. It's a larger size muffins, and try putting it in here and see what happens. So I just have a little bit in the bottom. I'm just waiting for the oven to come up to temperature, but this I think is already done. Well, can go a little longer. Okay, I'll call it done. This should be a little bit harder to kind of slice in half, but I will try. But if this texture is the same as the thick ones, we'll know it doesn't really matter. Yep. Looks very similar. Yep. Didn't really change a whole lot. So let's see what happens in the oven. So the timer's gone off for the oven. I only had it in there for 5 minutes. Looks like the tops still need some cooking. I might try flipping them. We'll see. Let's try another 5 minutes and see what happens. So another 5 minutes have passed. So let's take a look at the one in the oven. There they are. So it's a little bit dented from I used a knife on it, but that one's pretty pretty. I'm gonna wait a little bit to let them cool down before I slice them. So overall, they're tasty. We've already eaten, what, one of them? Two of them? But it feels like very, very damp and very just damp. You know, there are air bubbles, so it was being cooked through. So we'll see if this interior texture is any better in here or any different. I don't know if better is the right word. So I'll be back. So it's been quite a while, so we're going to go ahead and cut one of these and see if the texture is any different. So I was reading about crumpets and they said you don't necessarily cut them in half. It's very similar. What do you think? Yep. Didn't really change it putting it in the oven, but then again it was also easier to do in the oven without monitoring a hot pan. So that might be something to say for it.
Salty.
Yeah, they are a little bit salty. Which is weird because those were the same batter. Thank you for joining me today in the kitchen as we tried out the recipe for the crumpets. Unfortunately, since I haven't had crumpets before, I don't know what I'm comparing it to. All I have to compare it to is English muffins, and they were just kind of moist. It's still delicious and easy to eat, so we have some snacks now. So I'm not sure if I'm going to look for another recipe with freshly ground grains for crumpets. I found one for English muffins, but I've done English muffins in the past and they just take a lot of effort. So I'm not sure what my plan is going forward, but if you have any advice after seeing the batter and seeing how it cooked up, please leave it down below in the comments. Please consider liking and subscribing, and we'll see you next time.